Today in the shop, we've got something absolutely awesome that we are stoked to go over and to show you guys. We've got XTC Motorsports' 2022 Ford Bronco. This is in the all-new hot red pepper color, and it does feature a ton of aftermarket parts that have been picked out and spec'd perfectly. Starting out, we've got the Casey Highlights Pro 6 gravity lighting featured on the ADD front bumper and of course up along the top. These lights are absolutely awesome and insanely bright. As you can see in the front, we've got the Warren VR Evo winch. This thing's an absolute monster. It's gonna be fantastic for when you're off-roading, getting stuck and pulling out other friends. From there, honestly, my favorite part of this setup right now is the Baja Kits front mid-travel setup. This is a +3 front end featuring a completely upgraded lower control arm. It's all boxed and welded with a billet upper control arm. With that too, it includes extended axles and of course the extension for the tie rod ends. This spec that XTC has put together features the Icon shocks. In addition to that, you can see they did pick out some pretty sweet Icon wheels fitted with the Toyo MT tires. These are 37s, they're super aggressive and they look awesome. From there, kind of moving down the side, he's got the rock slide steps installed. These are super robust. They hold up off-roading as an actual rock slider and of course a good step to get in and out of the vehicle. Working our way around the back of the Bronco, you can see we've got another ADD bumper featuring a couple little accessories mounted to it and of course the Icon matching rear spare tire with the 37-inch Toyo MT. Another great option that I absolutely love that XTC has installed on this is the Baja Kits trailing arm. It is a billet trailing arm featuring a Delrin or nylon skid plate all the way across the bottom of it that's been riveted or bolted on. Awesome option. It's going to handle basically any abuse and provide a very rigid setup. That wraps up the aftermarket features that have already been installed on this by XTC. We're going to go over some of the factory features such as the engine, factory performance, and some of the options that are loaded onto this. So under the hood, we've got the 2.7 liter twin turbo V6 engine. This guy's producing roughly 315 brake horsepower stock. It's been an absolutely phenomenal application so far. Of course, it has a lot of similarities with the 3.5 liter that is based out of the Ford F-150 and of course the Ford Raptor. With that being said, we've got a ton of stuff we can do to this. Lots of options as far as intakes, charge piping, various tuning options, and of course exhaust. From there, this guy also features a 10-speed automatic transmission. So far throughout our testing, we do enjoy it. It's been pretty good. One of the cool features is when it's actually put in manual mode, it will hold gears. It won't kick down. So that's a pretty cool feature and it definitely works well. Drives extremely smooth and helps with the larger tires for sure. All in all, the 2022 Ford Bronco is pretty awesome. Like I said, we do love the 2.7 liter and the 10-speed automatic transmission. However, of course, it is lacking some things just like any other vehicle out there. One of those things is obviously power, initial torque, and throttle response. Fortunately for you guys and any Ford Bronco owner, we have developed a great solution for this. We've got our all-new V2 tuning box that's going to provide a great improvement to overall power, throttle response, and torque. Here we have our VRTune V2 tuning box. This is the Bluetooth version, allowing you to switch in between 7 tuned maps and set up a warm-up timer. This device easily installs underneath the engine bay with the plug-and-play harness. You simply tee into 2 factory sensors underneath the engine bay. This is going to be the map sensor, manifold absolute pressure sensor, and the boost pressure sensor. Fortunate for anybody with a 2.7 liter Bronco, they are extremely easy to access. These sensors are literally right on top of the engine. You can see right here is the boost pressure sensor, and then back here is your map sensor. So really, as far as installing it, you're gonna see how we connect it here in a second, but it's as simple as unplugging the factory sensors and just teeing in our aftermarket harness here. From there, it's as simple as just routing the harness to the location that you're going to place this. And that's all it takes. It's as simple as that. All right, so we are ready to install our harness here. We are gonna start out by disconnecting the factory boost pressure sensor. It's as simple as pulling back on the white tab and sliding it off while pressing down. From there, we are going to grab the T on our harness labeled B. We're simply going to grab the female end of the T and plug it into the sensor itself and then push forward on the gray lock. From there, we're going to take our male end and plug it into the other side of the factory harness. Now it's time to get the manifold absolute pressure sensor plugged in. From here, we're going to kind of start routing the wires just to get them out of the way and to make sure that we're not kind of tangling up or getting them stuck in a location that's not going to work out when we go to mount the tuning box. Now that we've got the boost pressure sensor installed, it's time to connect the manifold absolute pressure sensor. This is going to be labeled A on our harness, and then right on top of the intake manifold itself is the actual sensor. It's going to be the same process as the boost pressure sensor. You're simply going to slide back on the plastic lock and press down and then slide the sensor apart. From there, we are going to connect the male end into the sensor itself. It's got a similar lock as factory. It's gray. You simply slide it forward once it's already seated. And then we are going to take take our end, the female end, and plug it into the male end of the factory harness. Now that both sensors are completely plugged into our VR-Tune tuning box harness, it is time to route the wiring. Typically, we like to get the actual box over on the firewall closest to where the brake booster would be. There's a really good location over here with a factory harness that we can zip tie it to. So from there, we're just gonna start routing this. We're gonna get everything zip tied. The best way to do this is to find factory lines, ones obviously that aren't gonna be hot or disruptive to anything, and to zip tie them just kind of uniform and make it look good. All right, now that we've got our harness all routed and zip tied in place, it is time to plug in the tuning box to the actual harness itself. First, we're gonna start out by removing the jumper plug. From there, we're gonna slide it into place and fasten it with the purple lock. After that, we're gonna get it zip tied down into our location on the factory harness over here. Like I said, over by the firewall, and it'll keep it nice and safe and out of most of the heat. Now that you guys have seen how easy it is to set up the V2 tuning box on the Ford Bronco, we're gonna hop inside and go over some of the features and functions. All right, now that we've got our VR-Tune tuning box installed, it is time to go over some of the features and functions. We're gonna start out with the Bluetooth app control. We've already got the app installed on our iPhone here. For this process, we do provide a well-written guide with links and a video. Let's start going over some of the functions. As you can see on the screen here, there are 3 settings that you can actually program. We've got a race, a sport, and an eco feature. Each one of these, you can go in and set the actual setting. As I mentioned before, there are 7 different maps that are able to be pre-programmed or set on this. 7 being the most aggressive, 5 being obviously a good medium, and 3 being a good lower eco setting. In addition to this, we do have a warm-up timer. This is gonna allow you to set a timer so that once the engine's started, it'll basically hold the tuning box from functioning or providing performance until the vehicle is up to a running temperature, depending on whatever you set the timer to. From there, you also have the option to simply disable and turn off the tuning box altogether. This basically brings the ECU and the vehicle back to factory state. This is great for when you're going to the dealership or if you're concerned with warranty. However, in addition to that, the tuning box can be removed at any time without leaving any trace, as it does not physically write or modify the software on the ECU. You can also apply the jumper plug in place of the tuning box. Simply disconnect the tuning box and plug the jumper plug in as seen previously in the video. This is basically going to route the harness back to completely stock, reconnecting those sensors as they were OEM. In regard to the fine tuning, we're going to get a little more in depth with this. Really, you should start out with reading our guide on setup and tuning. However, it really comes down to finding the best setting for your location, fuel grade, and ambient temperatures outside. Obviously, setting 7 out of the 7 is going to be the most aggressive. It's going to provide the highest boost levels. However, it might not provide the highest performance depending on your fuel grade and the temperatures outside. This is where it's really important to actually test the vehicle and to understand the setup after reading our guide. First, we're going to start out by setting the tuning box to 0. This leaves the vehicle at a factory state with no improved performance. Then we're going to get the vehicle strapped down to our dyno and run some stock baselines. From there, we're going to move through the settings, going all the way up to setting 7 and run all of the modified mapping to see how the vehicle does on the dyno and what kind of gains it performs. So we've wrapped up our stock baselines with the XTC Ford Bronco on our dyno. We've got some results over here on our monitor. As you can see, the Bronco came in at roughly 240 wheel horsepower stock and 372 foot-pounds of torque. Obviously, torque comes in super early with the small turbos. It does drop off, however, peak horsepower does carry throughout the entire RPM range. It's time to get some results with our VR-Tune tuning box installed. We're gonna start out with setting 7 and see what this thing can do. All right, guys, we have wrapped up our dyno runs with the VR-Tune tuning box installed. We've got some results to go over on our dyno. Keep in mind, it is over 105 degrees here in Arizona in our dyno room right now. However, the results are still pretty awesome. On our graph over here, we are displaying gains of roughly 45 wheel horsepower and about 78 foot-pounds of torque to the wheels on our Mustang dyno. This is pretty phenomenal for just a plug-and-play application. We're excited to do some more testing and see what else we can do in the other modes, but for now, this is pretty awesome. In addition to our peak versus peak gains, we're seeing some insane torque numbers at low RPM range. You can see up here at 3,100 RPM, we are literally hitting 450 foot-pounds to the wheels. Aside from that, as you can see through the entire power curve, the torque is greatly improved along with the horsepower. Reflecting the horsepower, you can see, again, roughly from 3,100 RPM all the way up to 5,000 RPM, this horsepower curve is greatly improved and increased. I mean, we're carrying a solid 45 to 50 wheel horsepower all the way through that RPM range, so it's gonna create a huge huge difference when driving. From here, the tuning box will provide phenomenal gains, whether you include any additional bolt-ons or not. There's no need to remove it or update any of the software. It will always adapt as the ECU is in full control. Now it's time to get the Bronco off our dyno and out on the street for some driving impressions and some quick testing. All right, guys, we are out driving around in the XTC Ford Bronco to get some initial impressions and feedback on the VR-Tune tuning box. Right off the bat, it is obvious that we have a lot more improved throttle response and low to mid range. You can certainly feel that increased 78 to 80 foot-pounds of torque when you are in that low to mid range power band. As soon as the vehicle comes into boost, you feel a significant improvement in torque. With that being said, it does certainly make a big difference pulling through the gears at wide open throttle. Aside from that, I mean, even just average daily driving, cruising around, getting into, let's say, quarter to half throttle range, as boost comes in, it is significantly more responsive. Keep in mind, this vehicle does have 37s on it and has not been re-geared. So with the 10-speed transmission, this has really improved that initial bottom end that was before lacking. From there, you can also expect considerably better towing for the guys that are going to be towing with the Ford Bronco. I think that's something that'll really benefit, you know, anybody that's towing, you know, camper trailers, you know, dirt bikes, UTVs, etc. Overall, we're super pleased with the results, and we think anybody with a Ford Bronco that happens to try out the VR-Tune tuning box is going to absolutely love it.